Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever it is when you watch this video, good something. I hope everybody is staying safe and everybody is enjoying this school year as it started. I'm going to talk to you today about feature writing. And this feature writing presentation is really specific to the UIL, feature writing prompts. Now you could use this presentation, you can use this information for feature writing in general, but we really tailor it to our UIL journalism contests. So just to kind of let you know where we're starting and what we're going with. So let's get rolling. And let me just tell you, it's weird for me to do a presentation like this. I don't have any students in front of me. I don't have anybody in front of me. I just have my computer and I'm staring at my own face, which is just not normal for a presentation. So bear with me. Hopefully we can make this as entertaining as possible. And hopefully you'll learn a little along the way, because really that's the most important thing, is that we want you to get something out of this. So let's start. And first we have to figure out how we're going to advance. Oh, there we go. We figured it out. So feature writing it's my favorite of our five contests in UIL, because it's really the contest allows you to tell a story. You have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you get to be descriptive, and some of your own voice gets to come through in the lead writing. And it's really where I think you can be more creative than our other contests. So has a special place in my heart. We really want you to use a lot of quotes, and we really want you to do that detailed description and the vivid writing. You've probably heard your teacher say, show, don't tell, right? So we want you to show the reader rather than tell the reader. So don't tell me that Thor is handsome. Show me that Thor is handsome. So does he have long flowing hair, big blue eyes, scruffy beard, a chiseled chest, pumped arms, and a tight buttocks? Then I can see that. You just tell me somebody is cute. I don't know it. So show me, put me there. Don't tell me that a student is smart. Show me that they're smart. Are they taking all AP classes? Do they make straight A's? Did they get perfect on the SAT? Show me. So take the reader there. And that's what we want to do on feature writing, is take the reader through this story with them. We want the reader to feel like they're there. So with our feature writing stories, we really like you to use the transition quote formula. And we're going to kind of break this formula down as we go through this presentation, but this is the generic formula. Now, the lead is the first box. Now, for a news story, our lead is usually one paragraph, but for feature writing, our lead could be one paragraph, could be 2 words, could be 5 paragraphs. It depends on how you decide to, which angle you decide to take your lead and what type of lead you write. That will determine the length. But that first box could be 1 paragraph or it could be 5 paragraphs. Following your lead is something that every feature story has to have. It's got to have a nut graph. And really all that is, it's like your news lead. It's the summary of what the story is going to be about, why this story is important, why the readers need to read it. You've got to do that concisely in 1 paragraph. And then we're going to follow that with a direct quote that's linked to the nut graph, and then just go straight into our transition direct quote formula. Now, our transitions can be 3 different things. Our transitions can be facts, our transitions can be indirect quotes, and that's where you take what somebody has said and you put it in your words without quotation marks, or it can be a partial quotation. And you're going to see some examples of the different types of transitions as we break this formula down. But you just continue with that transition direct quote formula until you finish the story. So each one of these boxes, except for the lead, is a paragraph. And our paragraphs in journalism are shorter. They're about 30 to 60 words. Our direct quotes in feature writing tend to be a little bit longer than they would in news writing. So really 2 to 3 sentences is what we're looking for in the direct quotes, unless it's a really good long 1 sentence that really shows some emotion. And that's the other thing for feature writing. We want our direct quotes to show the how, the why, that really show the emotion so that we can feel. A good feature story is going to make our reader feel something. Maybe we feel happiness, maybe we feel sadness, whatever it is, we want to draw an emotion out of the reader. So we want to make sure that we pick the direct quotes that have the most emotion in them for our feature stories. So we're going to start at the beginning with leads. The lead is the opening paragraph, and what we really want is, I always try to describe this to students, is like, it's like we're grabbing the reader's head and we're bringing them into the story. A good lead means our reader's going to stay with us. Normally, I would say, normally at this point, I'd say I get hundreds of newspapers across my desk every day at the office, but I don't because I'm not in the office. But I still get a lot of high school newspapers and yearbooks that come across my desk at home. And if that lead isn't good in a feature story, I stop reading. So we want to make sure that it's filled with description, that we focus on those action verbs and specific nouns, and we're really careful about our use of adverbs. We're going to have some adjectives in there, but we're going to be really selective of whatever adverbs, because often when we use adverbs, that means we're not using a strong action verb. We're using that adverb to carry the sentence, and we don't want our adverbs to carry out the sentence. We want action verbs because we can see those. And that's what we want, is we want to make the reader see what's going on in our stories. So the most important sentence in any article is the first one. Guys, it really, really is. So when you're participating in this feature writing contest, really concentrate on your lead. We want your lead to really wow the judges. We want them to look at that lead and have no choice but to read the rest of the story because the lead is so powerful and so good. So let's talk about some of the characteristics of a lead. I already said earlier, sometimes leads are longer than one sentence. Sometimes they're not. We want them to be specific to your story. And for our contest, for this UIL feature writing contest, we really want your lead to be written in third person. We don't want any yous, we don't want any second person, we certainly don't want first person in the story, because we want that third person objective for the UIL stories. I know that when you write for your high school newspapers and your yearbooks, you may have some second person, and sometimes it works, but for this contest, we want to stick straight with third person. And then we want to make sure that if our story is about something that's very serious, then we have a serious lead. If it's something that's kind of silly and fun, have a silly and fun lead. Make the tone of your lead match the tone of the story. So there are all different types of leads. And I don't want you to get hung up on these. I don't want you to say, oh, I've got to make sure that this time I write a descriptive lead. No, you write your lead and it's gonna be one of these things. And sometimes you might have narrative and descriptive and direct quote and startling statement all in one lead. So don't limit yourself. This is just trying to give you an idea for you beginners of, if you need a label, what different types of leads there are. And there are many more different types, and people call them different things. So don't get too hung up on this part. So let's look at some examples of these, of the narrative, descriptive, and some of these are more than just narrative, or they're more than just descriptive. So let's look at some of them. So here's a narrative. On New Year's Eve, Charles Curcio stayed later than planned at a small TV repair shop to make sure his customers would have their sets in time to watch the King Orange Jamboree Parade. His kindness cost his life. It's a short lead, it's 2 paragraphs, and that second paragraph is 1 sentence. And it's a narrative, it tells a story, but it's also got some twist in it because we have that last sentence, his kindness cost his life. I'm gonna read further on this story. I wanna know what happened. I wanna understand how he lost his life. And the story goes on to say, is basically he was working late and his store got broken into and he was murdered. But this 2 paragraphs got my attention and I'm reading further. If your lead does that, if the reader, after we read that lead, I'm gonna keep going, then you've done your job, and that's what we want. So let's look at a few more different types of leads. Here's another narrative lead that I always love to read to high school students. On senior Alicia Briggs' 2-hour trip with her parents to church, she turned around and noticed that in the back of the Suburban, all of her bags were packed. All of a sudden, I realized I wasn't going to church. I was on my way to the airport, she said. I started screaming, crying, and swearing at my dad, trying to figure out what was happening. That's when her dad told his 17-year-old daughter he'd put her up for adoption. I like to read this one to high school students so they know it's never too late for us to get rid of you. I'm going to start reading this as a bedtime story to my own children, I think, especially with virtual learning. This has been a whole new fun adventure. But really, this is a good lead. It's a good lead because it's got drama in it. It's got a nice quote in it. You don't really know what's going on. And even when you get this last sentence, that's when her dad told a 17-year-old daughter he'd put up for adoption. You still don't really understand what's going on. So you want to read further. And it also does a nice job with the details. If you notice, it's a 2-hour trip. It's a Suburban. It's not just a car. They're specific. And 17-year-old daughter. All of those little details make a difference in your lead. And that's what we're looking for. And what this story is about, students always ask me. And since you can't ask me right now, I mean, you could raise your hand right now, I guess, but that might be a little bit weird. I mean, go ahead, raise your hand. Everybody raise your hand. I'm not there. I have no idea that you're doing it. But now I'll answer your question now that you've raised your hand. So what this story is about is that his daughter, this young girl, Alicia Briggs, had kind of taken a turn for the worse. She was dating an older guy, started dabbling in drugs. And so what her parents did is some people from their church had moved to another state and they moved their daughter to go live with them. But in order for those people to be able to take her to the doctor and do this and have guardianship, the parents had to give her up for adoption. And those people had to take on guardianship. So that's what this story is about. And the good thing is that this story is about when she's at her new school and she's turned her life around and everything is going really, really well for her. So it's a cool story. And it's a good lead. And it's written by a high school student. So let's look at another one. The man she loved slapped her face. Furious, she told him never ever do that again. What are you going to do? Kill me, he asked, and handed her a gun. Here, kill me, he challenged. She did. Every time I read this, I ask the audience, who's going to read further? Everybody raises their hand. Heck yeah, you're going to raise your hand. Whoa, you know? It's a great lead. And again, it's a brief lead. It's short. You know, it's 4 paragraphs, but several of those paragraphs are just one, actually, yeah, 3 of those paragraphs are just one sentence. One is only 2 words, but it's powerful. We're going to keep reading, and that's what we want to do. And I want you to notice that the man she loves slapped her face. Slapped is a great verb. We can see that. We can see that verb. We know it happened, and that's what we want. We want to be able to picture that in our minds. And then he challenged. They did a really good job of using powerful verbs in this very short lead. And remember, in journalism, we're trying to write real concise. We're not trying to be really wordy. We're trying to tell the reader, this is what happened. And this is a fantastic, concise way to bring our readers into the story and keep going. Here's another one, and this one came out of a high school newspaper. It's 2 a.m. and Junior Carter Wade stumbles through his front door. He's hours past his curfew and 20 milligrams of Xanax past what his body can sustain. Wade doesn't remember being driven to a rehab center in a cop car. He wasn't aware his body was being loaded into an ambulance after he became unconscious in the back seat. He couldn't process that his heart was about to stop. Now, there's a lot of things I like about this lead. Number one, I like how it starts. It's 2 a.m. I think that's a nice beginning. And then it goes straight into a powerful verb. He stumbles through his front door. And then it gives a really nice sentence so we can figure out what's going on. And then it really uses a repetition of he doesn't, wasn't, and couldn't. We've got those 3 negatives that we use as repetition to really put a rhythm to this lead. And good leads have a rhythm. If any of you have ever seen me in person, you all know that I can't dance. I have no rhythm when I dance. If you come to the state meet, I will dance for you as the papers are passed out. And everybody gets a little sad, I think, when they see that. But I know, even though I can't dance, I have no rhythm when I'm on the dance floor, I do know when a story has rhythm, when a lead has rhythm. And you keep writing until you get that rhythm. And a lot of times that repetition will help set that rhythm. And so in writing, when you're talking about repetition, 3 is usually the magical number. Usually 2 is not enough, and 4 is often too many. So 3 is usually the magical number in that. And I want you to notice that this isn't like really blatant repetition, but it's that it's the doesn't, wasn't, and couldn't. Those negatives really, really give it some nice rhythm to this. Here's another lead. I'm going to have to move my face up so that I can read it. Another descriptive. When Angel Electra entered the library, the clamor of children faded. Dozens of little faces swiveled around to watch the 6-foot-tall drag queen, clad in teal and black lace, glide through the space. As she sauntered towards her perch, she waved to the attentive crowd. She then took a seat and began to read from the Drag Queen Story Hour coloring book. What is a drag queen? Electra asked, reading from page 2. A performer, yelled a boy from the audience. A dragon? Asked another. No, not a dragon, Electra replied. Between a dragon and a person, another kid shouted. Electra paused. That works, she deadpanned. It has some really great description. And again, the verbs that they choose to use are really powerful. Swiveled, sauntered, you got deadpanned. Those are great verbs, and we can see those verbs. It's that show, don't tell, and that's what we're trying to do. And then the use of dialogue within this lead, I love it. Now, the reporter had to be there to get this dialogue. So, if you're writing for your newspaper, your high school newspaper, your high school yearbook, those are things that you're going to want to do. Hopefully, we put enough information in a prompt that you could use dialogue within your prompt. We try to really make sure we've got a lot of stuff there for you. So let's go look at another one. So a direct quote lead. I would tell you flat out, don't ever have just a plain direct quote lead. But this lead has narrative with it. It starts as a direct quote. Don't be mad, I took some pills. Karen Keaton cried as she stooped over the toilet. A few hours later, the 14-year-old freshman died after a series of coronary arrests. This, to me, is probably one of the best leads written by a high school student that I've ever read. And it was written 30 years ago by my best friend at high school. We'd had a rash of suicides at our high school, and the protocol is that we don't cover suicides. Journalists don't cover suicides because it often, spurs other suicides. So we don't cover them. So what we did is at the year after this freshman killed herself, we did a story about her mother and what it was like for her mother to live without her daughter. And this lead that Steve wrote was written 30 years ago, but I still stand by it. It's one of the very, very best leads I've ever read. But while it starts with a quote, don't be mad, I took some pills, that's not what makes this lead. What makes this lead is the next sentence. Karen Keaton cried as she stooped over the toilet. I have read this lead hundreds of times to high school students, and now to my computer by myself. But every time I read this lead, I see Karen Keaton stooping over that toilet. It is a short description, but it is a powerful description. And then a few hours later, the 14-year-old freshman died. That 14-year-old freshman makes that sentence. It's not a sentence we really want to read, but it means we're going to keep going in the story. We want to read this story. That's what a powerful lead does. So I write every one of those UIL prompts. Sorry if you don't like them, but I do. I write them all. And I try really, really hard in my feature stories to give you enough information to craft a really good feature lead. But I've never written a prompt with a quote that's powerful enough to lead your story all by itself. But this isn't a quote lead all by itself. There is narrative with it. Karen Keaton cried as she stooped over the toilet, and that's what makes this lead good. So don't ever think you can just have a quote and then your nut graph. You're not going to move forward. And what we want you to do is we want you to place first, second, or third so that you get to advance. So got to concentrate on having a good lead, and a quote lead isn't going to get you there. So here's a quote with narrative. The end of a simple phrase changed the 13-year-old boy forever. Yes, it does last for the rest of your life, the doctor said. And honestly, that alone is strong enough for this story, like to lead this story, because I'm going to read, what does that mean? What was it? Like, what did he have? And it keeps the lead goes a little bit more and does a little bit more description. On the day of his diagnosis, James Mapes was in the waiting room, grasping his mother's hand tight, hoping and praying the blood test would be in his favor. The physician then broke the news that James had been fearing. He would be stuck with this condition for life. Immediately questions rushed through his head. Why did this happen? What will people think? What will people say? Now, oh my goodness gracious. Something just happened. I don't know why that jumped on my screen, but it did. Um, oh, I need to make sure. Are we still recording? Yes, we are. Sorry. Going back. So, ooh, there it is. I'm so sorry. Technical difficulties. You gotta love them. Gotta love them. So, this lead, again, it's got some really nice, great verbs. It's got really good description, and it's got a quote really high, but it's got that narrative wrapped around it. And so it's a good, solid lead. So, startling statement leads tend to be really short, but they really bring the reader in quickly. His last meal was worth $30,000 and it killed him. Every time I read that, it's just like, what was his last meal? What kind of steak would some kid? I say, well, what do you think it was? It was a really expensive steak. It's a heck of an expensive steak, I just got to say. Actually, his last meal was a bunch of cocaine and balloons, and he ate them, and they exploded in him, and he died. So, lesson learned: we don't eat cocaine. We stay far away from cocaine. This young man did not, and it killed him. So, startling statement lead. His last meal was worth $30,000 and it killed him. Are you going to read further? Heck yeah, you are, because you want to know what it was. And then one of my all-time favorite leads is the next one. These are two separate leads. Junior Josh Duckworth has a fetish. I mean, everybody's going to read further because we want to know what his fetish is, right? And it turns out his fetish would, in my opinion, make him a very lonely boy. He had a fetish with reptiles. On the jump page of the story, there was a picture, and had I seen this, I would have never read the story because I'm terrified of snakes. It was a picture of his room, and there were all these aquariums, and filled with the aquariums, there were snakes and lizards, and I'm terrified of snakes and sharks, terrified of those things. I know they don't really hang out together, but both things, they're S words that I just don't like. Anyways, it's a great story. It's a fantastic lead. And it's, what is it, 6 words? It's a great, great lead. Here's a really fun lead. And remember, we want, if it's kind of a fun story, let's make sure that the tone of our story, that our lead starts that way. When they heard the screams, no one suspected the rooster. I mean, come on, you gotta read further, right? I mean, what the heck? Um, Desjardins Gaines, too, was toddling down the sidewalk Monday, lugging her easy bake oven. She became the victim in one of the weirder animal attack cases police can recall. In the cluster of beige houses at Lime Street and Safford Avenue, where Desjardins lives, man and chicken have coexisted peacefully for years in quiet defiance of the city ordinance. That ended Monday afternoon when authorities apprehended the offending rooster named Rockadoodle 2 and its sister named Hen. It's a great story. It's a great, fun little story, and it's got a really nice lead to go with it. And again, really good details, really good verbs. Lugging her easy bake oven. I mean, if you can't picture that in your head, I don't know who you are. That's great description. And whoever named the poor roosters. One's Rockadoodle 2. Great name. The other one's Hen. I mean, come on, let's put a little more effort into that. Okay, here's another fun lead. At 21, he's a grizzled thing. Sparse black hair barely covers his liver spots and flaking skin. Glaucoma and cataracts plague his eyes. Flattened hooves slow his gait to an almost crawl. But in just 2 days, Potsy will be ready to party. On Tuesday, assuming he survives that long, Potsy will win the Guinness World Record title as the oldest Vietnamese potbelly pig. Again, it's a good lead because you don't really know what it's talking about. When I first started reading this years ago, it said at 21 he's a grizzled thing, and I read the description. I was like, oh my god, that poor man. That's so. And it's not a man, it's a pig, but it's a nice little twist. And it's fun. It's a nice, fun story, fun lead. So some of those writing devices that we saw in those leads is we saw repetition, we saw short, punchy sentences. We even saw some fragments. And here's the thing. In feature writing, you can have a fragment in your lead if you know that it's a fragment, okay? If you're using it to add punch to your story, if you're using it to add power to a paragraph, use a fragment. We saw dialogue, that sentence length to set that rhythm, and we break a few rules writing leads because we're trying to bring that reader in. And it's okay to break a few rules as long as you know that you're breaking the rules. Run-ons are never okay. Had a little freshman boy one day argue with me on and on and on and on. It's not, because in journalism, we're trying to write tight. We're trying to write concise. Fragments, yeah, okay, because that's less words. Run-ons, more words. No, thank you. No good. All right, so the lead should open with a specific and then go to the general. So several years ago, we had a prompt, a UIL pre-writing prompt about a young man who was a Leaguetown alumni, and all of our stories, all of our prompts are set in the fictional town of Leaguetown. I'm going to shut this door real quick. They're all set in the fictional town of Leaguetown, and this one was about a Leaguetown alumni who had gone off to war and he was killed. So we had a lot of students that wrote leads that looked like this. With America engaged in a war in Iraq, many students know U.S. military men who have lost their lives. Leaguetown lost one of its own last month when Nicholas Ferrer was killed in Iraq. Is it a horrible lead? It's not horrible, but if we change the name of the kid and the name of the town, then this lead could go for anybody, any soldier that was killed in Iraq. So it's not specific, it's a general lead. So we want something that only can be used for the story about Nicholas Barrera. So this is a much better lead. When Brianna Barrera didn't hear from her son Nicholas for a week, she knew something was wrong. Maybe it was mother's intuition, but she knew. And when she saw two officers walking toward her door, her worst fear was confirmed. The officers said they were sorry to deliver the news, but Nicholas died with honor, she said. Dying with honor, how does that help? My heart was breaking. My boy was gone. This lead can only be on the story about Nicholas Barrera. That's it. It won't work on any other story about a soldier dying in Iraq because this was his mother's experience for her son. And I told you earlier that when we write feature stories, we want to use quotes that have emotion. That last one, dying with honor, how does that help? My heart was breaking, my boy was gone. That's emotion. That's what we want to see in the quotes of your feature stories. And this is a specific lead. We want specific. So let's look at general information. Here's the general information from one of our prompts. It's about Patrick Manabay. And he was 10 years old when his mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and she died shortly after. And Patrick didn't talk about his mother's death. He was quiet, withdrawn. He's a sophomore now at your high school, and his aunt gave him, when he was a sophomore at your high school, his aunt gave him a letter from his mother. In the letter his mother wrote that she knew he would change the world for better one day. Motivated by the letter, Patrick designed a website for a fundraiser project, 5 for Life, asking people to donate $5 for Pancreatic Cancer Research Fund. To promote the fundraiser, Patrick made a video using old videos of his mother and interviewing his sisters and dad. The video went viral with more than 1 million views. So far, Patrick has raised $500,000. So this is the general gist of one of our prompts. There's direct quotes from Patrick and his dad, and there's a lot more information, but from this, you can get an idea of what we could do for the lead, right? So let's look at a couple examples. So what went wrong? Let's look at this lead. Death is a tragic event. And I have to use a different voice when I read this one because it's very serious. Death is a tragic event, especially when you lose someone close to you. Patrick Manabay understands this better than most. He lost his mother to cancer several years ago. And normally if we were in a classroom, I'd be like, okay, guys, what went wrong? Everybody raise their hand. But since it's just me, I'll raise my hand. Okay, I call on Jeannie. I might be losing my mind. Y'all, I've been alone for a long time, many months. I mean, I got my kids here, but it's not the same. So Jeannie, what do you think went wrong with this lead? Well, it's a general lead. It talks about death. Death is a tragic event. Well, this is like, seriously? No kidding. We know that. We don't have to tell the readers know that. You don't have to tell the readers that death is a tragic event, especially when you lose someone close to you. Again, that's super obvious. We don't need to tell the reader the obvious. And again, if we change the name of the kid and the type of cancer, this could go on any story about that. So we don't want these big global themes. We want to talk about Patrick. We want to talk about his experience. We want the reader to feel what Patrick felt. So here's another one. Everyone can imagine what it would be like to lose a parent to cancer. You would be lost, sad, and withdrawn. You would probably be jealous of your friends who have both parents. You might cry yourself to sleep at night. You might shut down completely. That is what Patrick Manabay did when he got a letter from That is what Patrick Manabay did until he got a letter from his mother that she wrote before he died. Okay, so this everyone can imagine, that's what's wrong with this lead. We're asking the readers to do the work. You figure this out. And quite honestly, does anyone want to imagine what it would be like to lose a parent to cancer? I don't want to think about that. You don't want to think about that. We don't want to imagine that. And we shouldn't have to, because Patrick went through this, and we're going to tell his story, and we're going to feel his emotions if we write it properly. This one, there's not a whole lot of emotion in this one. And again, if your lead starts with everyone, it's not a great lead. It's too general, it's too broad. We want to start with the specifics. We want to start with this kid and his feelings and his experiences. So let's look at another lead. After his mother's death from pancreatic cancer, senior Patrick Menaway was lost. I was sad, he said. I was angry. I was jealous of my peers who had moms. So he lived his life withdrawn, speaking only when he had to. Then, when he was 15, his aunt gave him a letter from his mother, and everything changed. Her words woke me up, he said. I knew I was wasting my life and that she would have been disappointed in me. Disappointing his mother was the last thing Patrick ever wanted to do. So after talking to his father, he jumped into action. Patrick created a website and started a fundraiser project, 5 for Life, with a goal that 5,000 people donate $5 each to the Pancreatic Cancer Research Fund. This is a much better lead. We've got quotes in it. We've got feeling. We've got specifics. This lead could only work for a story about Patrick Menaway. That's what we want to see. That's the type of lead that we want to see for these UIL feature writing contests. So some of the pitfalls that we see, we're going to look at all of these. So guys, we don't want a straight news lead. Patrick Menaway raised $500,000 for Pancreatic Research Fund. That's great. And we need that in the story. We need that fact in the story, but it cannot lead your story. It is not a feature lead. It's a straight news fact. We want a story in our feature lead. We want to bring the reader in. And we also don't want second person, first person. We don't want cheerleading. We are proud of Patrick Menaway for raising $500,000 for Cancer Research Fund. Way to go, Patrick. Woohoo! Yeah, we don't want any woohoo leads either. That's editorialized, okay? Just present the facts and let the reader make the decision. So don't take the obvious. We talked about that earlier. Some of my favorite leads. This was in a yearbook. Every day, millions of people wake up, go to work, or go to school, but some days they don't. So I was like, holy crap. Oh, I probably shouldn't have said crap. This get recorded. Holy moly. We'll go with that. Holy moly. It was the apocalypse. Nobody woke up. No, that's not what they meant. They're writing a story about weekends. Yeah. No, it's a horrible lead. And then the bottom one, millions of teenagers have jobs. They work for many reasons. College, cars, just to have them spending money in their pocket. Super boring. And again, we got everybody, we got millions, we got all of society. If you have those things in your lead is not any good. It's not any good. It's too general. We want it detailed. We want it specific. We want it to only work for your story. So this is really important, because what I've learned over the years is the more I talk about adding description in, the more some students go off the rail and they add in everything. Your description must be relevant and it must add to your story. You don't have to describe every little thing. We want to make sure that it's relevant description to your story. So the house on 53rd and Huntington Avenue stood motionless. I don't know about you, but I've never seen a house wiggle. I guess during a hurricane it might wiggle, but for the most part, they're motionless. So this is stupid description, right? It's stupid. And then down here, here's some more stupid description. Before the sun even rises, 17-year-old Raymond Buster pushes back the red and blue comforter on his twin bed and drags himself to the small yellow shower, which is weird. He quickly washes his light brown hair and puts on his shorts, black running shirt, and neon green running shoes. Color was really important to this writer. As he walks out the door to head to his cross-country practice, he grabs a strawberry Pop-Tart and waves goodbye to his mother, who is still in her fluffy pink robe. His mother's probably super excited that she made this story. I made the cut in my fluffy pink robe. Okay, so none of this description is relevant to him being a runner. None of it. Maybe the green running shoes, but that's about it. Getting out of bed might be important. But other than that, this is just random description. We don't describe just for the sake of describing. We want to make sure that our description is connected to the story. So here's relevant description. 5 a.m. The alarm blares, and Senior Raymond Busters, hard name to say, drags himself out of bed after only a 5-hour slumber. The mornings come early for this 17-year-old cross-country competitor, but he says it's worth it. I want to get to the state meet this year, he said, and that means I run early and I run often. It's a fantastic lead. It's short. There is description in here. We have the alarm blaring. We have him dragging himself out of bed, a 5-hour slumber. There's a lot of great detail in there, but it's so much tighter. And every piece of this lead is relevant to the story. Every piece. And that's the important thing. So we want you to have description, but we want to make sure that your description is relevant to your story. So don't imagine this leads. At this point, if we were presenting in a big room, I would make everybody raise their right hand, and everybody does. It blows my mind. And I say, okay, we're all going to take a pledge. And they all take the pledge, even though they have no idea what pledge I'm going to give them. But here's the pledge. Come on, raise your hand, everybody. Bring them up, bring them up. I promise, you say it. I can't hear you, but I feel it. I feel like you're saying it. I promise not to ever write and imagine this lead. Okay, everybody, you got it? You got to really buy into that, because let's look at this. Imagine what it would be like to get shot in the head with a .57 Magnum. Dallas resident Carly Patty doesn't have to. Her little brother shot her in the face accidentally last summer. Okay, who on earth wants to imagine what it's like to be shot in the head with a .57 Magnum? Now, every once in a while, I do get a freshman. They'll be like, oh, I would. Okay, well, you know, a freshman. We can count them. No, I have a freshman, so I love my freshmen. But seriously, we don't want to imagine what it's like to be shot in the head with .57 Magnum. Absolutely not. Imagine what it's like to catch a catfish with your bare hands. Okay, I already told you all about my snake thing, so I'm not going to catch a catfish with my bare hands. They are very close to snakes. Senior Callie Opshaw doesn't have to. She does it most weekends. So the whole thing is a imagine what. You could do that with anything. Imagine what it would be like to sit through a hurricane. No, I'd rather not. Imagine what it'd be like if your house burned down. Again, rather not. You know, you're making the reader do the work, and it's lazy writing. So don't do that. Don't remember, we took the pledge. We all took the pledge. I saw you. I'm watching you. Saw you. Okay, so let's go. So instead of the imagine this lead, okay, let's do this one. Senior Callie Upshaw's weekends are anything but typical. After cheering at a football or basketball game on Friday nights, Callie often spends her Saturdays shoving a bare hand into a catfish hole and wrestling out a 30-pound catfish for her friends to tie up. It's a total rush to catch a catfish with your bare hand, she said. Until you do it, you won't understand. I will never understand. That is how Callie sold the idea of noodling to her friends. The results were the same. Callie is right. She says noodling is a rush. Senior Sierra Villalobos said it's like nothing I've ever done before. Okay, this is much better than the imagine this lead. We've got great detail. We've got great verbs, shoving a bare hand into a catfish hole and wrestling out a 30-pound cat. Those are great. And we've got really good quotes that are embedded in this lead. It's a solid lead. And guys, if you didn't know, noodling is a real thing. They really do it. Texas and Oklahoma mostly, but people do it, and there are girls that do it. So after this lead, what do we need next? Remember, if we go back, think back, everybody's thinking back. Oh, it's the nut graph. I raised my hand, I said it. I forgot to call it myself though, sorry about that. So after the strong lead, you need a strong nut graph. So remember, it's the summary, it's the news lead, it's the 5 W's and the H. Oh, it's the thesis to your story. That's my English coming out. I never taught English. I'm not certified to teach English. I should never teach English. I would be horrible at it. But I like using the word thesis because then I sound really smart. Oh, the thesis. Okay, so here's our lead. We just read that. It's a total rush. Callie's right when she says noodling is a rush. And then here's our nut graph. That rush spread to a few more friends, and now with Callie at the helm, the friends comprise an all-female group called the Fat Cat Ladies, which noodles on local rivers most weekends. So we know this is a story that's going to be about a group of girls called the Fat Cat Ladies that noodle, that do noodling. And so that's all it is. That's all a nut graph is. It's telling the reader what the story is going to be about, because we don't really know for sure what the story is going to be about in the lead. We get a good idea. And then what I also want you to notice is that the writer, who was my intern at the time, because my interns usually write these leads, took the word rush from this. I'm pointing to the screen like you can see me. Took the word rush from that quote. Callie is right when she says noodling is a rush. They pulled it into our nut graph to make sure that our lead flows into our nut graph. And that's what a seasoned writer does. A seasoned writer makes sure that that lead flows right into that nut graph because we want a story that flows into each other. So after that, we're going to go into that transition quote formula. So, gotta move my face again. I don't know if you see that. I'm all the way over there. Okay, so our first transition. The girls have become so proficient in their new sport that Callie and senior Brooke Frio hope to compete in the East Texas Noodling competition this spring. So it's a fact transition. It's just straight fact. We don't have to attribute it. Direct quote that will expand on that transition. We don't expect many girls at the tournament, but that won't stop us, Callie said. We are ready to bring home some trophies. So that direct quote is directly related to that transition. The transition flows into that direct quote. The next transition, Callie and her father, who checks rivers ahead of time for the girls, trained each girl, but even with that training, the thought of noodling was intimidating. The first time I went noodling, I wasn't sure I could do it, Villalobos said. I weigh 98 pounds and Callie caught a 30 pounder right in front of me. I didn't know if I had strength or bravery to do it. So again, that quote is expanding on the transition before it. It's talking about that intimidation, and then Villalobos really expands on that, okay? So where do we get our transitions? Okay, there's two places where we can get our transitions for feature writing for the UIL prompts. We can get them directly from the quotes. Okay, so this is a chunk on the, if we had the prompt in front of us, this would be a chunk of quotes from Callie. And up there it says, this isn't an easy sport. So what we did is we took that and we made that into Callie admits that noodling is not easy. So it's an indirect quote transition. We took what she was saying, okay, and we put it in our words. So it kept her meaning, but it's our words. And the Callie admits is the attribution right here. So we can get we can get transitions from our direct quotes, but we also can get transitions from the material at the very beginning of the story. It talks about the situation, and that's mostly all fact-based. And that's where the girls have been so proficient that they're going to compete in the East Texas Noodling competition this spring. That's where that transition came from. It came from the very beginning of the prompt where it just talks about the situation. So we don't have to have an attribution because it's just a fact of what's going to happen. So two places where you can get those transitions, from direct quotes and from the information at the beginning of the situation. So how do you end a feature story? We want you to end it with a powerful quote and tie the ending back to the lead. So what I tell people to do is when you get your feature story, when you get your prompt, there are a couple things that I think you should do. And the first thing I think you should do is you have 60 minutes for this contest. So you have 15 more minutes than you do for news writing or editorial writing. So what I think you should do is you read the prompt front to back, and then you put it down and you think about a boy you like, a girl you like, what you want for dinner. You think about anything but the prompt. And then you go back to the prompt and you think, okay, what stuck with me? What stayed in my head? Because that's what I want to create my lead around. And I get this from years ago, many, many years ago at this point, when I was in college. I had to do a story about a young man who was HIV positive. It was my first big story at the University of Texas, and I was 17 years old. And I had interviewed this young man, Joseph, several times, and he told me all about his life, and it was hard. He was in his early 20s, and he had full-blown AIDS when he was dying. And he was really smart. He graduated from college early. He graduated from the University of Texas, and he graduated early, and he got this really great job. He was making really good money. He had this beautiful apartment, but when he was diagnosed with AIDS, he did what he thought he was supposed to do, and he told his employer. And so the employer was like, "Oh, I'm going to do what I think I should do," and he fired him. And back then, you could do that. So Joseph got fired. So he didn't have any money coming in. So he had to move in with his parents. And when he moved in with his parents were like, all right, we can do this. They gave him his own set of silverware, his own bathroom, and he had to kind of keep to himself all the time. And then one day when he was at a doctor's appointment, he came home and the locks had been changed and the phone numbers had been changed. His parents didn't want him anymore. So by the time I interviewed Joseph, he was in hospice care. He wasn't about to die, but he didn't have anywhere else to go. So the hospice center let him stay there. So when I got ready to write the story, I had all this stuff. I had all these notes and all of these stories that Joseph had told me, and I didn't know how to start my story. So I called my best friend, and it was actually Steve, the guy who wrote the story, the lead about the young girl who committed suicide. Steve was actually also at the University of Texas with me, and he was my editor at the time. And I said, Steve, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. He's like, you know what? Put it all down, go for a walk, and then come back. And the first thing that comes to you, wrap your lead around that. I said, okay, I'm going to do that. So I did that. And then I came back and I thought back to Joseph again. And the thing that came to me first was when I asked Joseph what it was like to be dying. And he said, it was like he was holding this piece of glass, and the glass represented his life, but the glass had really, really, really sharp edges. And he was holding onto that glass as tight as he could. But he knew pretty soon that the glass was going to cut him deeper, and it was going to slip, and it was going to fall, and it was going to break at his feet, and his life would be over. Comparing his life to that piece of glass, that's what I led with. All of those other things I put in the story, but that's what I led with. So when you get in and you start this contest, go in and you read that prompt front to back, and then you put it down and you think about just 3 minutes. Just give me 3 minutes. Think about anything but the prompt. And then go back to the prompt and think, oh, man, what sticks with me? What quote really stands out? Or what piece of description? And then wrap your lead around that. And then you'll have a great lead. It'll be specific to your story. It'll be powerful. And then the second thing you do after you figure out what you're going to lead with, then you look at that prompt and you're like, okay, what quote is strong enough to end this story? And you circle it because you don't want to accidentally use that quote anywhere else. You want to save that because you want to start with power and you want to end with power with your feature stories. So save a good quote. You can tie the ending back to the lead, but that is difficult to do in 1 hour, and it is difficult to do with a prompt that you're not actually going out and doing all the interviewing. So I really tell you the best way to end it is with a powerful quote. So a couple of things before we wrap up. Yes, you can. You can use the first name on second reference if the story is about a student. This is for feature writing only. And you don't have to, it's just an option, but you noticed in that prompt about Callie, we used her first name on second reference. You can have a lead that's longer than a paragraph. You can have quotes within your lead. Remember, we saw that embedded. Guys, don't write in passive. Don't use too many adverbs. If you're handwriting this contest rather than using a computer or a laptop, which you're allowed to do, and if you have really messy handwriting, print and skip lines. That will really help the judges. The judges are getting old like me. And her eyes are starting to go, hence the snazzy glasses I got on for y'all today. And it will help us be able to read it because there's nothing more frustrating than when you're reading a paper and you can't actually read it. You can't judge it. You don't know if it's any good because you can't read it. So make sure that it is legible for the judges. Don't stack quotes. If you follow that transition quote formula, it will never be a problem. You always want to have a feature story filled with quotes. So I talked about that, what I really think that you should do. And I'll leave that up for just a second because I'm sure like, oh, I want to look at that slide one more time. Here's my email. Feel free to email me any questions that you have. It has been a pleasure talking with you today. And good luck. I hope to see you all at the state meet in May. And have a fabulous journey on this weird and wonderful 2020 year that we're having. Thank you very much for coming in and tuning in.